and allow him to just go ahead and share and get to us whatever he has for us today.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sherry, for having me on today. And this is it's always a pleasure to be able to come and to share with you and your audience. You guys are always so welcoming and so supportive and very appreciative of the information that we do share when we do. So thanks for having me here. I was invited to come on and speak a little bit about seasonal depression, and many of you know what it is. Many of you don't know what it is. I'll kind of talk a little bit about kind of the clinical definition and terminology of what it is, and symptoms, and how to treat it, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully you guys can draw something from it and be treated, be inspired, if it is something that you do struggle with. So seasonal depression is kind of the layman's term. The clinical term is actually what we call SAD, or SAD, which is an acronym for seasonal affective disorder, AFFECTIVE. That word affective is just a clinical term for mood or emotions. So seasonal affective disorder is really a form of depression that is particularly debuts around winter, fall or winter. And that's when the sun goes down a lot earlier in the day, and we experience less sunlight just in general. And then it typically improves, it dissipates when the arrival of spring takes place. So that's when you start seeing more sunshine, and the days are longer, minute by minute, as each day grows older. So the most difficult months for people who have SAD, again, seasonal affective disorder is the acronym, in the United States tends to be January and February. So that's typically the thrust of when it is most severe, and it's much less common for people to conversely experience it in the summertime, because again, you've got the days are just longer, and the longest day of the year is like June 21st, which is of course the beginning of summer. So you almost never see it then. But SAD, as we call it, is much more than just what we call the winter blues. It's much more than that. The symptoms can be distressing and overwhelming, and they can actually interfere with your daily functioning. So, it can impact how you interact with people, where you go, just how much you sleep. I mean, how productive you can be at work. It really can impact a lot of different areas of your life, this seasonal depression. And it's about 5% of adults in the US experience it. And it typically can last about 40% of the year. It's more common mostly in women than it is in men. So women generally experience more frequent mood disorders than men, particularly, and namely depression or depressive derivatives. So that's just pretty commonplace.
Is there a reason why that is?
Well, so research is not able to actually pinpoint why that is, as a matter of fact. But what we know, generally speaking, is that women are generally, and this is a big generalization, generally more emotionally driven, more emotionally impulsive, more emotionally impacted, more emotionally attuned. That is not an indictment on women or against women, and it is also not to suggest that women are more emotional than men. It's not the case. Men and women are equally emotional, but in terms of how those emotional expressions are carried out, women are typically more demonstrative and more expressive, and so and also guys being more logical. They're not guys being more logical in terms of the decision making, and how men govern themselves behaviorally, from their left brain. That can also play a role in why you see those statistics kind of being imbalanced. So so some of the symptoms in the diagnosis, we'll talk a little bit about that. Common symptoms of SAD include fatigue, even with too much sleep, and weight gain associated with overeating, craving carbs, etc. So you can see some of that stuff. Even if you're sleeping too much, you could have fatigue. SAD symptoms can also vary from mild to severe. So there are degrees of how sad you can be, and many symptoms are they overlap. They're very similar to what we call MDD, which is major depressive disorder. So such as, again, we talked about the feelings of sadness or having a depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you once enjoyed, also changes in your appetite, usually eating more, craving carbs. That is typically kind of customary when seasonal affective disorder is onsetting. Change in sleep, again, sleeping too much, usually. Loss of energy or increased fatigue despite increasing sleep hours. So we talked about that a little bit. Also, increase in purposelessness, not having a motivation to do anything physical. It's or slowed movements in or speech, which these actions must be severe enough to be observable to others. So it's not just not being purposeful by your own standards, but it's also other people making reads and observations that there's an emotional disturbance in so much that it's impacting your behaviors. Feelings of worthlessness or guilty, thinking, difficulty thinking or concentrating or making decisions, having an inability to focus, and then even suicidal ideations, thoughts of death or suicidal ideations, wanting to hurt yourself in intentional and calculated, imagined ways, or what we call passive suicidal ideations, thoughts of just not wanting to be here anymore, just wanting to just disappear and not exist. So SAD, it may begin at any age. It can, seasonal affective disorder can happen at any age, but it typically starts when a person is between ages 18 and 30. That's typically the onset. After 30, then people tend to more consistently emotionally regulate. They've had an opportunity to accept how life works and all the ebbs and flows of it. They kind of plateau and stabilize more emotionally after the age of 30, statistically speaking.
I'm real good at 49. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. That means that SAD does not knock on your door. No, but it is a part of maturing and just understanding how life works and how emotions ebb and flow. And so that's much more of a learning curve for those who are at between the ages of 18 and 30. So harder to deal with, harder to get their minds around. So let's talk a little bit about treatment. How do you treat this thing? How some of us have experienced this, some of us have not. Some of us are listening to this and saying, oh my God, I hope I don't experience this. And if I do, I want to be prepared for it as to when it comes, how to handle it. And those are good ideas to have. So let's talk about treatment and get ready to kind of, bend the corner. So SAD can effectively be treated in several ways, including what we call light therapy. Light therapy is, we'll talk about that in a moment. So antidepressant medications, psychotropic medications. You would see a psychiatrist for that if you are open to taking medications. Talk therapy, literally just processing through the emotions of what you're feeling, talking about it, sometimes getting it out is very, very therapeutic. It's just therapeutic just to get it off your chest and not hold it in. Or some combination of these three things that I mentioned. Again, light therapy, antidepressant medications, and then talk therapy. So while symptoms generally improve on their own with the change of seasons, symptoms can improve more quickly if you target treatment and if you're intentional about treating those symptoms when you experience them. So that's important to know. So let's talk a
I have
little
a
about this
question
light
though.
there.
I have a real quick question. So,
Mhm.
because it is connected to seasonal, like, is that a long-term thing that you have to adjust, or is it that people are, they're put on meds like indefinitely, or is it just during the time period where they need to stabilize?
Yeah, that's a good question and the right question to ask. It is typically when people just need to stabilize. So it's the cases in warmer months are rare. It almost doesn't happen at all. People almost don't never experience seasonal affective disorder symptoms when the warmer climates are upon us. But it is possible if for those people who do experience it even during the warmer months, then your psychiatrist may recommend that you stay on the medication throughout the warmer months indefinitely
Mhm.
until they can titrate you down off of it and kind of wean you off until you don't need it.
Okay.
But generally speaking, you would only need the medication during the months that you're actually peaking in. However, when you are taking a psychotropic medication, it's important to make certain that you don't just jump off of a medication. Jumping off of a medication when your body has gotten used to it can send your body into involuntary shock, and now you can have different reactions to just dropping it cold turkey. So there is anytime you're on a psychotropic medication, your psychiatrist will direct and guide you to titrate down gradually and wean off of the medication to kind of gradually introduce the change to your body so that you're not putting your body in a culture shock.
Yeah. I have a
Yeah.
transparent moment. Like, some years ago, I was a manager at Kohl's, and it was like a hectic season. The kids were young. It was a lot going on. And so my primary actually put me on Paxil.
Okay.
And he
Yeah.
was like, it would help, it'll help you in this space. So I'm thinking, okay, well, this is like just something to calm me down, and not realizing, and I stopped it cold turkey, and I passed out right after,
Yeah.
um because I didn't know. Well, he didn't give me, instructions. Of course, he didn't think that I was going to stop it when I did, because I only did it long enough to get through that hump, and it was no joke. So it's really
Okay.
important to know
Yeah.
that part. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've had your own experience with it. You know how
Yeah.
jostling it can be if you do that. So very, very important to wean off of it gradually.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about light therapy and some of these other
Okay.
treatment options that we have for it. Um, light therapy, it involves sitting in front of a light therapy box that emits a very bright light and filters out harmful ultraviolet UV rays. It filters that stuff out. So it usually requires 20 minutes or more per day of just sitting in front of that light therapy box. And you can Google them, you
Mm.
can Amazon.com them, you can even get recommendations and referrals by your PCP as well as your therapist on how to locate these and where to find them.
Mhm.
Um, but again, it usually requires about 20 minutes or more per day. And typically first thing in the morning, it's ideal to do it during the winter months, so kind of like that first onset of the morning, because it really helps set the trajectory for your day. Very, very
Okay.
important. So most people see improvements from light therapy within 1 or 2 weeks of beginning treatment. So you can expect to see that improvement, not immediately, but again around 1 to 2 weeks. So you got to expose your mind and your eyes and your body to it over time, and then just like anything, it creates a trend, and then you adjust and you adapt. So to maintain the benefits though of it and prevent relapsing, going back into a regression and feeling those deep down and depressive symptoms and moods again, treatment is usually continued throughout the winter. So you want to make certain that you go all the way through and don't stop. Now, because of the anticipated return of symptoms in the late fall, some people may begin light therapy in early fall to prevent symptoms. So if you want to get in front of it, then you might want to start at early fall just to kind of preemptively strike, and then that can carry you through. Again, but you got to be consistent and persistent in it. Like another version of light therapy, this is a kind of a spin-off of it, is also doing, of course, traveling if you can. See if you can get when it's cold, when it's darker, when you're in those fall and winter months. See if you can schedule a small getaway. Shoot down to Cancun if you can, really quick. Yeah, and check it out, and just take a couple of days, and then come back. Or if you can't get out, if you can't travel, then maybe you can do things like watching movies that have tropical sceneries in them. Watching movies that have tropical sceneries, you can look at pictures of a tropical sunny environment, and just spend time, intentional time, at taking your mind to that place, focusing on going on a mental vacation. And you'd be surprised at how it does impact your mood by just, again, watching movies, even listening to music that puts you in the mind of something lighthearted or something fun, something bright, something. All right, music is very, very impactful and powerful when it comes to treating depressive symptoms. So things like that are very, very important. But those pictures and those movies, those are two things that you can, again, kind of a spin-off of light therapy. It's not direct light, but it is putting yourself, exposing yourself to the place that you want to be at. And that's always very, very helpful. So lastly, we talked a little bit about talk therapy just a moment ago. And talk therapy, particularly what we call CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that can also treat SAD. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, what we call SSRIs, are a type of antidepressant most commonly used to treat SAD. So that helps the serotonin, which serotonin is a neurotransmitter that sits in what we call the synapse portion of your brain. And when it's sitting there, it's helping you emotionally regulate. But when depression happens, then the serotonin actually reuptakes through the ventricles of the brain. And so your serotonin is not stabilizing where it's supposed to be. The consequence to that is when it doesn't stabilize, then your mood doesn't stabilize. So now you're more likely to be mercurial, depressed, up and down. And so that's because the serotonin is reuptaking. SSRIs, so selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they inhibit the reuptake so that your serotonin stays right in that synapse where it's supposed to be, and it doesn't go anywhere else, and consequently your mood regulates. And that's a little bit of the neuroscience. I don't want to get too heavy into that, but that's kind of how it works. So when you take a psychotropic medication, namely an antidepressant, then that's what's happening chemically in your body. And that is obviously the research on how effective that is empirical and replete. It does work. So those are just some tools to help, and just some psychoeducation around it. I hope it was helpful. Any other questions that you may have?
And I'll be real quick because I know you have another appointment. But how would a person know whether it's just the regular, like I'm fatigued, I'm tired, or whether it's something more heavy, more serious, as far as with our mental health, because everybody's under a strain, like we're still in the midst of this be still season. And so there are a lot of things. How do you know when I need to go and get some extra help? How can I determine that?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. And that I would first start with just observing trends and patterns. So if you're tired, in just a moment, a day. I mean, fatigue happens to us all throughout the day at one point or another. So that's one thing. But if you're noticing that you're getting adequate sleep, you're getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep daily, and then you're still feeling that drag, that depressed mood, that fatigue, if you're still feeling that stuff, um, and it's persistent, if it's actually persisting, if you see a trend of it over a span of several days
Mhm.
in a row, then I think that would be a really good opportunity and idea to start trying to look out for to get some help. Also, pay attention to behaviors of, are you socially apathetic, not interested in going out and engaging with people, just want to stay in. That can be a telltale sign of, okay, maybe this SAD is actually onsetting, maybe it's coming. Another treatment, which reminds me of another treatment recommendation, and that is to challenge yourself to get out of the house and do something. You've got to challenge yourself and get out of the house and do something. Exercise. It's really easy to stay in the house during the winter. I actually love the house all day long. I love the house in the summer, the winter, the spring, and the fall. I love being at home.
Mhm. You like your
But
trips
those
too,
of you,
though. You like your
I
trips.
let's
So
be
you
clear
get
about
your
that.
sun.
I certainly do. I certainly do. My son. But when you're experiencing that trend of depressed mood and behavior, and you're seeing yourself wanting to stay inside, challenge yourself to get out, challenge yourself to go exercise and get active. That your body will reward you. You create neural pathways that are direct routes to dopamine. Dopamine is the reward hormone, so it gives you that pleasure and that sense of fulfillment, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of success. You need that in moments of depression, and that is what directly combats it. So I think those things are very important to remember as you try to battle SAD.
All right. Well, you've given us quite a bit of information. It's been helpful for me, and helpful in ways that I can help somebody else and direct them the right way. And so I really appreciate you taking your time and being here with us today. It's really funny that it's called SAD, and that's the acronym. So that should stick for some folks as well. So I'm really hopeful that this season will be a little bit different than last season, that we have, gained some tools. We've learned some things in the course of this year that we know by now, like those of us who are in the midst of therapy, need therapy, thinking about therapy, that you realize that, wait a minute, you might need some extra help. And it's okay to not be okay. And
Mhm.
so thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for dealing for coping with it in the midst of these technical difficulties, but I appreciate you so much. Anything else you want to share about your practice and all of that? Because we didn't do that introduction in the beginning. You want to?
Yeah, not a problem. Clifford Clark. I'm a licensed psychotherapist here in the state of Michigan, and I am. You can find me on my website, transparent-counseling.com. I am a marriage, relationship, sex addiction, and men's issue specialist. I do work with mood disorders like anxiety, depression. Do some trauma work as well, personality disorder work, such as histrionic, borderline personality, and even some narcissism work,
Wow.
and even some neurocognitive disorder work. I have a few clients that are on the spectrum, so I do some of that as well. But people primarily seek me out for the aforementioned specialties. I counsel as well as preach and teach in ministry from what we call a psycho-Christian intersection, which is just a blend of psychology and Christian thought harmoniously fitting together. I don't see them as competitors. I see them as complementary pieces, one to another, co-explaining each other. So that's a little bit about my practice and the work that I do. You can find me on all social media platforms at Clifford J. Clark. And I think you guys are smart. You can take it from there.
Are you accepting new patients right now? Are you?
Oh my goodness. So it's a tricky question, tricky answer. I am right now booked. However, I do have a waiting list. So
Okay.
if you're interested in getting in, please just call the office. And the voicemail is going to say that I'm not taking any patients. I need you to understand that voicemail, but also leave a message, and then you'll be put on a waiting list if you're interested in getting in.
All right. Well, thank you so much once again. And hopefully you'll be back. I kind of call you like our resident psychotherapist for the healing station because we need lots of help as we heal. And so
Yeah.
again, thank you so much. Pastor Clifford Clark, trying to put a handle on it, trying to do better. All right. All right. Thank you so much. And you have an amazing weekend. All right.
Thanks so much, Sherry. We'll talk soon. Okay.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.